What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40k. So in this one, I'm going to be going over an excerpt from the novel Aurelian, which talks about the Primarch of the Wordbearers, Lorgar, and his fight with one of the strongest bloodthirsters inside of Khorne's army. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because in our other channel, the OMS podcast, we do book readings for the Primarch novels. And we recently read Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, and you really see where Lorgar is coming from with his devotion to the gods and the high powers and stuff like that. So here, he's actually going with Ingethel into the Eye of Terror to basically learn some of the truths of the galaxy. And here, he actually has to fight against a warrior of Khorne. So, for the most part, we know that Lorgar is known as one of the weakest of the Primarchs. He's not an expert combatant like a lot of the other Primarchs are, but he is a Primarch nonetheless. So let's see how Lorgar fares against this battle. The sound began as the promise of thunder. Lorgar raised his head just as the tortured sky went black. Our gargoyle shape cast darkness across the clouded heavens, blasting wind downward from its beating wings. He saw it descending in a graceless spiral, but despite his eye lenses tinting to reduce the greasy glare of warp space, he could make out little detail in this figure's form. It struck the ground like 100 meters distant, sending up a vast spray of powdery sand. The ground shook beneath Lorgar's feet. Stabilizers in his armor knee joints clicked and thrummed harder to compensate for the quake. Its wings rose first, huge, bestial black wings, the membranes between the muscles and bones as tough as old leather, cobwebbed by thick, pulsing veins. Scarred fur coated much of its body, while the rest of its musculature was encased in great brass armor plating. Its horned head defied easy description, but to Lorgar, it looked like the malicious features of Old Terra's greatest devil spirit, the Satan, as seen in some of the oldest scrolls. It did more than tower over any mortal man. It stood above them as a colossus. Its fist, each the size of a legionary, gripped two weapons. The first, a lashing whip that thrashed at its own accord, sidewinding across the sands, and the second, an immense axe of beaten brass, its surfaces encrusted with dense metal, runic scripture. It stalked from the crater it had made, each fall of its armored hooves sending tremors through the world's surface. The targeting reticules and streams of biological data across Lorgar's retinal displays offered no insight at all. One moment, they listed details in a runic language the Primarch had never learned. The next, they told him that nothing was there. When he spoke, his voice was a breathless exultation, crackling through the lowest frequency of its Helmvox grill. "What in my father's name is that?" Ingethel had slithered away while Lorgar stood, yet he could still hear his voice. Hunched upon itself, doubled over and leaking fluids from every orifice on its head, the demon psychic sending was a weak stroke. The guardian of the throne of skulls, the Deathbringer, the Lord of bloodthirsters, first of Karnath's children, the avatar of war given form. In the mortal realm, it will become known as Angrath, the Unbound. It is the champion of the blood god, Lorgar, and he has come to kill you. He opened his mouth to reply, but all sound was stolen in a tempest of breath as the creature roared. The scream was loud enough to disrupt the electronics in the Primarch's helm, causing his oral intakes and retinal displays to crackle with static. Lorgar tore the helm free, choosing to breathe the thin air over fighting deaf and blind. His lungs reacted immediately, clenching like twin cores within his chest. The granite gray helm fell to the sand by his boots. Fear didn't clutch him the way it would a mortal. He feared nothing but failure. Defiant irritation set his skin crawling. Why would the deities test him in this way? After all he had endured, after being the one soul to seek the truth, now this? Lorgar raised his maul, activating the generator in the haft. A rippling energy field boomed around the weapon's spiked orbed head, hissing and spitting in the wind. Sparks streamed away from its spines like halogen rain. The demon thundered closer, step by step. This was never part of the great plan. You are not a duelist to match the lion. You are not a brawler to match Russ, nor a fighter to match Angron. Not even a warrior to equal the Khan. You are not a soldier like Dorn, nor a killer like Kurz. Be silent, Ingethel. Karnath has violated the Accord. Karnath has violated the Accord. Karnath has... I said, be silent, creature. The winged demon roared again, its fanged maw wide, the veins in its taut throat as thick as a man's thigh. Even braced against the gale, Lorgar was forced back several meters in a skittling slide over the gravel. The Primarch breathed a stream of Colchissian invective, and as the stinking wind died down, he replied with a shouted challenge of his own. Before sanity could wrest control of his limbs, he was charging, boots pounding on the red sand, his Crozius raised in both hands. The first blow struck with the force of a gunship falling from the sky, and with an impact at the same volume. The cleaving blade crushed against the golden maul, both weapons banging together and locking fast. Sparks sprayed from the elbow joints of Lorgar's armor as the muscle-mimicking servos overloaded and shorted out. But he did it. He blocked the first blow. In spiteful retaliation, the beast's presence, his Crozius kissed the axed edge with leaping bolts of electrical force. With a cry that would have shamed a feral world carnosaur, the Primarch hurled the bloodthirster's axe backward in a heaving shove and brought his warhammer to fall, smashing into the creature's knee. At the moment of connection, faster than mortal reactions could process, the weapon's power field protested at the kinetic treatment and burst outward in a blast of force. Something in the demon's leg cracked, and with the wet rip of a tree trunk falling, first blood. Lorgar was already scrambling back, stumbling over the quaking sand when the lash found its throat. The spiked coils bit as they wrapped tight, turning the trial of breathing into an absolute impossibility. In the panicked rush of distorted senses, he saw the creature driven to one knee, its back-jointed bull legs bent in submission. The Primarch's first blow had near crippled it. Had he been able to take in any air, he'd have roared in exultation. Instead, he crashed to his knees, clawing at the serpentine weapon encircling his shoulders and throat. One arm was pinned to his body by the lash's wrapping caress. The other clutched and pulled, dragging the whip off in a mess of snarling armor joints. Lorgar heard the bloodthirster's wings rattling, felt the force of more wind as they beat again. Another acidic spurt of panic knifed through his thoughts. The demon will take off and drag him into the sky with it. He rolled into the whip, trapping himself further for the chance to tear his Crozius from his fist wedged against his body. The lash around his throat squeezed in leathery an embrace, freed of all resistance now. As he was dragged across the sands towards the demon, Lorgar hurled his maul one-handed with a strangled cry and the last of his strength. It struck the bloodthirster's face with the juicy crack of shattering bone, silencing the victory roar that had been brewing in the beast's lungs. Fangs clattered down into the Primarch's armor in discolored enamel hail. One sliced his cheek open with the daggerish fall of a stalactite. Had he been able to breathe, he'd have laughed, but pulling himself free of the slackened whip was taxing enough. Lorgar's first 3 steps carried him to his Crozius. Numb-fingered slaps onto the hammer's haft, and he hauled it back onto his grip. He turned in time to catch the face full of sprayed blood and spit, shaken from the demon's broken maw. It stung his skin even as he wiped it away. The rust ate into his armor with hissing, stroking slowness. Let this be finished. He bared his teeth, unaware of his expressions, which reflected that of the demon's. For a wonder, it replied through its broken jaws and architecture of cracked teeth. Its voice was pulled right down from the thunderhead coiling above. All the strength in the flesh, and the bitter caress, and the taste of blood on my tongue. He knew these words, and he knew them well. Perhaps that beast had intended this as a distraction. Perhaps it was a channeling mockery straight from the mouth of God. Either way, Lorgar met the next attack with a laugh. The bloodthirster's axe crashed against his swinging maul. One of the weapons shattered with the same ease as the demon's teeth. Metal debris burned in the air, flickering with ghost-white flare, before clattering across the sands. Lorgar advanced, his maul still raised. "You quote my homeworld's holy scrolls to me? Is this even a moment, supposed to be a lesson?" The demon's wings snapped out at full reach, darkening all view of the horizon. The display sent the foetid, spicy reek of spoiled meat emanating afresh from its pinions. It wasn't finished. It wasn't even close. It needed no axe when it bore such claws. It never needed to walk when it possessed those wings. And that is the first part of this epic battle that continues on for a good chunk of the book. So here you get to see that a bloodthirster of Khorne is kind of struggling against Lorgar. They're kind of going back and forth. I mean, Lorgar still has the whip going across his neck, but at the same time, the demon is now without his axe, and he's got a broken jaw. So if you guys want to know the end to this epic confrontation, you can pretty much guess what happens. But go ahead and check out the novel Aurelian, which pits Lorgar against this bloodthirster, and it is an epic battle. So let me know what other fights from the Primarchs you want to see. If you guys want to read these Primarch novels with us, head on over to our other page, the OMS podcast, where you guys can get a free audiobook on us, and that way you can catch up with the books. We've currently read Angron, Magnus, Lorgar, and we just finished Ferrus Manus. We'll probably be starting on The Lion next, but check us out over there. And without further ado, guys, that's all I got for today. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of OneMindSyndicate, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.